All right, Justin, thanks for joining us on Creative Survival. For those of you guys who are new to the channel, Justin is one of my closest friends, and we're going to learn about his creative journey and his humble beginnings trying to be a filmmaker, and then where he's at now, and what his what his wins have been, what his struggles have been, and what he's been able to find through his own journey. So welcome, Justin.
Oh, Craig, I love that you consider me one of your closest friends. I would have never thought of you that way in my life, but I'm honored.
I figure I could say that to every guest so they feel special.
Yeah, Craig's one of my closest friends. We've been through a lot. I appreciate it. I love that I get to participate in this. So where do you want me to start, big man?
So let's just give the people a little bit of your background, a little bit of your history, where you started, and kind of just a brief history of like how you got to where you're at now.
Yeah. Well, originally grew up in Montana and found myself in LA going to film school, which is where I met you, actually.
Using me for my computer.
What was that situation? I don't even know how that went down, but somehow I ended up using your computer.
Yeah, you were like trying to finish, what was it, like the short film or something for a client, and you needed a computer, and I was the only one with like the original G5.
I worked a job with you.
Yeah, at Plastic Cow, yeah.
At Plastic Cow, that was fun. You were funny though, at least it seemed at the time you were funny.
That's how I trick people.
Anyways.
I went out to LA and I went to film school. There was something inside of me that felt like, since I was a little kid, I was like, I need to be in LA. I don't know why. I want to go on this journey. I have this creativity inside of me that I want to get out as far as the film industry goes. I didn't know specifically what that looked like long term inside of my life. I think that as I navigated through my journey of life, I found out that what I really wanted was influence. I desired influence, and I thought that the highest level of influence was through the film industry, but there's a million ways to influence people creatively, and it wasn't just solely that. But I had that as a young person, seeing people on TV, and so I was like, all right, that's what I have to go do. Again, I wasn't until later on in life I discovered, like, I actually want to, I want influence so I can make a positive impact on the world. And but so I went to film school, ended that, spent a short time in the entertainment industry working on different reality shows, and then kind of felt like this life shift where it was kind of like there's moments in life where you feel an invitation to break out of the normal that you're in, and you just go, I don't know what this is. It doesn't make logical sense. It totally takes me off track of where I'm at. But I ended up jumping in and traveling with an itinerant inspirational speaker and working as his personal assistant. And I felt like this desire inside of me to travel the world and begin to experience more things inside of life. And towards the end of that, I ended up getting finding the love of my life, Abby. We got married, and we left LA, and that was a big deal for me because I began to think like, okay, I already left LA, and when I left and traveled with this itinerant speaker, we ended up coming back to LA and starting an organization there. He didn't plan on being in LA. I left California altogether, and about 7 months into it, he was like, I just feel like I'm supposed to go to LA and start an organization out there, which was pretty cool because all of a sudden I'm back home in LA, and yet I'm still getting to do my thing. And at the end of that, I feel this interruption point where I get married and I feel like I'm supposed to abandon California again. And I end up, long story short, all these travels and different things ends up leading me to Northern California, which again, I'm in Northern California and I'm going, oh my gosh, like, how am I ever going to get to be creative again? There was something for me that feels like creativity has to take place in this hub of creativity called LA. And am I ever going to get to explore those parts of my life? And what is my destiny? And the reason I'm kind of like moving the conversation in these pieces is that there's this thing inside of us as human beings that feels like we have to have a clear-cut plan. And for me personally, the most liberating part of my entire journey was this posture of surrender. I started going, I'm going to surrender to the yes inside of me when something, there's a knower. We all have that knower. When we listen to it, things don't go perfect, but they end up they end up turning out in what feels miraculous. Like situations happen that we could have never planned and we go, oh my gosh, I could have never imagined it would be this good. But far too many people are actually connected to the deep fear inside of themselves, and they let fear rule their lives. And so they let fear override that voice inside. Why does this matter for my life? Well, the point is that my life took an entirely different trajectory, and I ended up in Redding, California, and I was processing my childhood. And what that looked like was going in and facing my greatest pain of a childhood where I was physically, verbally, and emotionally abused. And that was by my mom, and we talk openly about that and some of the stuff I do. And then my dad was very passive and checked out in the home, and very aggressive on the job site. He owned a business, and when I'd go to the job, that's where his aggression would come out. Because of that, that accumulated a lot of pain. And a lot of that pain crushed a lot of my soul and my ability to be creative and my ability to dream. And so there was this crossroads that happened for me where I suddenly had to settle down while I was sitting in Northern California, not pursuing any big dreams in Southern California. And I began to face my greatest fears of all the what ifs and the heavy conversations that I had to have with people about my abuse. And I began to let my pain come to the surface and begin a grieving process. And this is massively key because it took my life and took it on this entirely different trajectory where I'm now currently working as a life consultant. It's what I call a life consultant. It's kind of like a coach, but it's much different because I actually dig into people's lives and I help them face fears and I help them learn how to articulate their pain. But inside of that, some of my greatest creativity began to be birthed when I allowed myself to go on this separate journey of life. And I don't want to keep talking. I don't know what questions you might have inside of that, Craig. So that's just kind of a foundation. I'm now in Northern California. I work as a life consultant. And I've tapped into this wellspring inside of myself where I can create freely. And it doesn't feel taxing to do. It doesn't feel like there's only a limited amount of creativity. It feels like I have a never-ending connection to creativity and a confidence to produce whatever's inside of my creative space because I've overcome many of the hurdles of pain and fear that actually kept me limited from doing that all the way back when I first started film school back in LA.
Being where you're at now and having the 2020 of here were the fears that came up, here's where the shame was lying, and all the healing that you had to go through to unlock your full potential of creativity and imagination, and going back even to film school, like looking back, what were those things that were hindering you and how did they hinder you in that process?
Okay, so there was a deep level of insecurity and self-hatred inside of my life. And oftentimes when I deal with clients inside of my office, I'll talk to them about the idea that, oh, you have self-hatred. And they're like, no, I don't. I don't hate myself. But when we start getting down into the subconscious places of what they really believe to be true and how they treat the person in the mirror, I talk about this idea that we have dehumanized the person in the mirror. And all of a sudden, my goal is to reconnect them to their own humanity. This is a real person with real feelings who actually matters. What we discover is the relationship that they have with that person in the mirror is toxic, it's harsh, it's critical, it's condemning, it's highly judgmental. Why does this matter? So if I'm in a relationship with another human being and all I ever tell that human being is how much they fail, how they're not doing good enough, how they have to work harder, there's no celebration, there's no praise, there's no approval, no affirmation. What happens is, if I were to do that to you, Craig, you'd basically be like, you're an asshole. I don't want to work with you. I feel defeated when I do anything. Every time I try my hardest, you tell me I'm horrible and I'm not doing enough, right? And so how does that play a role in my college career and life? This inner battle with myself, there was this negative, pessimistic, harsh, critical condemning approach that I had at this unconscious level, and it destroyed my confidence. It destroyed my ability to believe in myself and to believe in what I had the capacity to create. So I remember, let me give you a practical example. So before, let me explain a film style. There's a film style where people are running around with cameras and they're like pop in with zooms and all kinds of wild, fast editing. That's normal currently to a lot of our editing and filming styles. In the early 2000s, when I was doing that in college, that was not normal. I was told by my professors that that was needless, pointless. It was not what film is supposed to be. And because I didn't believe in myself, I had an inner critic that wanted to just please people, because even in my abusive childhood, all I wanted to do was make authority figures happy with me. I abandoned major pieces of my creativity where I was actually on the cutting edge of creativity, and I'm sure other people were, because the ideas were unconscious ideas that were beginning to be infused inside of creativity, because oftentimes there's a massive release of creativity. And I can talk about that on a mental level and how that's been proven with apes and stuff in different regions of the world, where all of a sudden an idea will be released and they'll start doing something similar. But I don't have the time for that. But what I want to say...
I have no time for apes.
I have no time for these apes. But the point, the key in this is that there will be creative releases that will be changing the world as we know it. And if you're not connected to confidence and you are on the cutting edge of hearing that and feeling that, but you're not confident, you'll dismiss that and you'll miss out on the flow of what's actually happening. And that's what happened to me over and over again. I had criticisms from professors and I yielded to that criticism, and then I gave up and I became hopeless because I even had a hopeless button inside of me from the abuse inside of me. So I'd go, oh yeah, what's the point? I'm not going to be anything big. It's not going to work out for me. Yet over and over again, I have dozens of these examples where I was on the cutting edge of what someone had never done, and then I yielded it. And it wasn't until 2020, like you're saying, I look back and I went, why did I do that? Why did I do that? It's because I didn't love myself. I wasn't confident in what I was doing. I didn't just believe in me. I didn't do it for the sake of me. At the end of the day, I was doing my creativity for my professors, for other people. It wasn't for me to get something creatively out, irregardless of what other people thought. So my identity and my creativity was at the hands of what other people had to say, think, or feel.
That's really good. So even looking back at that, so knowing what you're at now, if you could travel back in time to the film, because I just want to clear something up for people. It's not like especially when we met, it's not like we weren't working in our field and in our industry. Like, it's not like we were starving, like, oh my God, where am I? Like, we were working on some, like, back when television actually had clout, we were working on fairly big TV shows. We were working with, big time people in the industry and big studios. So it's not like just because your creativity was stifled and like you were going through your own turmoil without even knowing it. It's not like all of a sudden it meant your whole life was shut down, right?
Yeah.
So if you could go back in time and even just talk to your college self with what you know now, what were some of the things that you would tell yourself to start looking for and rooting through to kind of start having your breakthrough earlier?
I think that's a fantastic question. I think first and foremost, I would tell Justin, I would say, you're more than enough. You don't have anything to prove, number one. Because when we're in a posture of trying to prove our value, we make a lot of, we have the potential to make really destructive decisions. And I'd tell him, I like you just as you are. You have more than enough inside of you. You're capable. You have what it takes. I believe in you. I would tell him everything was going to be okay. I think that that's one of the greatest lessons that we learn long-term in life. Sometimes people don't catch on to it till their deathbed. But, I think people finally hit it and they go, everything's going to work out. You're going to be okay. And I think that would have been key, because that would have given me, like, I had fear of finances. So when it came to my creativity, I would jump onto projects that weren't fulfilling, or I would let go of dreams that I had for creativity because I didn't see how I could make it, where I was going to get the money. I didn't know if I was going to get paid and end up homeless. I mean, I literally went through a season where I was like, I'm going to end up homeless. I'm going to end up homeless. And that fear was driving me. And I would have told Justin in college, Justin, like, fear doesn't need to be your God anymore. You've been yielding to fear as your God. You're letting it dictate your entire life. And in doing so, you're crushing your ability to create freely. And you're crushing your hope inside of this. I'm trying to think, because there was one other thing that came through my mind that I think would be really key. I would tell him, have fun in the journey.
I think that's easily overlooked by everyone.
I lost my capacity to have fun because all of a sudden I became this serious adult. And one of the things I talk to my clients about is regaining their childlike wonder. It's only in our childlike, we disconnect from our childhood. We often become bitter and resentful towards the child inside of us. And we go, I just got to be an adult, grow up. Well, I think there's something to choosing to be deliberate about your life and have some adulting that takes place, but severing ourselves from our childlike wonder is incredibly detrimental, because it's the child who was creative and carefree. It's the child who trusted, like, food's going to be on the table, everything's going to be taken care of. And it's only when we connect back to that childlike wonder was I, at least for me personally, able to actually create some really beautiful things out of my life. This is one other key part of my life, and I'll stop, but I wrote a book called The Tree of Life.
Yes.
And when I started the process of that book, it was the first time in my life that I decided to create something for the sake of creating for me, to express whatever I needed to express. And in the back of my head, I wasn't worried about whether or not I was going to publish it. I wasn't worried about whether or not someone was going to read it. It was a full-length novel. And I remember when I first started it, right before I activated getting into that posture, I had a moment where I was like, but how? How is it going to happen? How is it going to get published? Like, I first asked those questions for a quick second, and I had a flash of the Field of Dreams. Remember the movie Field of Dreams?
Build it, they will come.
Build it and they will come. And what it was really addressing wasn't just my approach to the book, but it was my approach to life in general. And it stopped me in my tracks. And I realized my whole approach to life has been the fear of how, rather than just joining into the just doing. I'm just going to do, and the how will come along the way. So I just decided, like, I'm going to let go of even worrying about it being published. I'm just going to build it. And if it's going to get published, it will come as it happens, as it's necessary. And again, that first step, getting over that first step of the hurdle and letting go of the how, is what all of a sudden gives people the freedom to start living fully alive inside of their creativity. And what it does is it kills desperation. So most people are creating out of desperation, and desperation is energetically a repellent. Like, you've been around people that you can tell they're like, this isn't going to work out. I need something. Give me money. Give me help. And you're like, ugh, get away from me.
Get away from me.
Or even after they come out of the creative process and it's like they have like this like layer of slime on them, and they're just like, I finally did it. And you're like, it shouldn't like be that negative of an experience to like create something. It's work and it can be stressful, but it should not like make it seem like it ruined your life.
And that desperation just destroys all the joy, and it destroys the opportunities. Like, I don't have an agenda with people because I don't have desperation in general in my life now. So when people interact with me, even when it comes to projects that I'm building out now, they don't feel this weird pull. They don't feel like I'm trying to take something from them, and they go, "Oh, he's fun, he's alive, he's at peace. I want to partner with that. I want to engage that process." And to say, and that may be some, you may want to, I don't know if you want more information on what happened, but a lot of miracles happen with that book out of that heart posture.
I'll say that.
No, and I would like to dive into that, and like right before we dive into that, just for the people watching who might be like, well, that's nice you got to create for yourself, but I have to create for a living, or I have a full-time job, I have a wife, I have kids. Like, how did you go about finding that kind of creative freedom where you just got to create for yourself in the midst of working, having a wife, having a life, having clients?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, if you actually want to create and you're actually passionate about it, you're going to create the space to create. So you may have seasons where it's like, I have a good friend named Paul Young. He's the author of a book called The Shack. I'm going to give him, this is a great example. Paul Young had lost everything. He had an affair on his wife and with his wife's best friend. What that did was it activated, once she found out about it, and she was not happy whatsoever. And what that did is it started spinning his life out. And for the next 11 years, all of a sudden he had to start unraveling the pain of his childhood abuse, where he was heavily sexually abused. All kinds of stuff starts happening. But it's almost like this avalanche that starts happening on a mountain, and it starts exploding, and that leads all the way down to bankruptcy and him losing his house, and him and an entire family of him, his wife, and I think 6 kids are living in a 900 square foot home, right? They've lost everything, and he's working 3 jobs, and his wife's working 3 jobs, and they only have 1 vehicle, and he's riding a bus and like public transit every day, and he's sitting there, and he's coming to Christmas, and he has nothing whatsoever to give his kids. And his wife's like, "Hey, Paul, why don't you write a story that highlights who God is to you and what you've learned about him in your process of healing, so that they could actually see that?" So he spends the next couple months moving towards Christmas just penning this story. And he's just expressing his creativity for the sake of loving his kids on buses, on trains, on these ride to works early morning and ride home late at night. And these little moments he's releasing his creativity because he's passionate. And he's passionate about it not just for himself, but he's passionate about giving the gift away to his family, that the only payment it's going to pay him is maybe a smile on their face, or maybe them just being disappointed they didn't get anything else under the Christmas tree. But long term, he's like, I hope this will touch their hearts. Why does that matter in the context of what you asked? He found space in the worst case scenarios to get something out. What the byproduct of that was millions and millions of books sold long term, because he wrote from his heart for a purpose that was specifically to touch his kids' lives. And he found the space to do it because he had love inside of him. He was provoked by love for them and the love of wanting to author that story because he actually loved writing. And so to me, if there are people who are practically doing life, have all this stuff, if you actually have something inside of you that's vibrant and alive and wants to create, you will, even in the worst case circumstances, find the space to slowly do that. He didn't have any pressure on himself to make it happen. So if you have to have a bunch of extra jobs, then you do. But I see so many people that feel like they have to have the stars align in order to create.
Right? The finances have to be there, and the time has to be there, and the right job, and the right, and like, yeah, it's like like everything has to stack up perfect, and that's never, because if you wait for that, then you're gonna have to wait for a unicorn. You're gonna be that like one exception to the rule.
Start by canceling your Netflix account. And getting up off your lazy ass when you're just totally broken at the end of the day and go, I'm going to go engage my heart and I'm going to go engage my creativity in this little space that I do have. Because it's funny, as a side note, I see so many people who do come through my office where they're like, I don't have time to do all this stuff and I'm living this life. And then we get into their life and they're like, I'm like, let's look at your time. And we get into their time management and they spend a couple hours a night drinking beer or going to a bar or just, and I'm not clowning on drinking beer, going to a bar. They're just finding things that aren't necessities to their life, that aren't inspiring or sparking them. And that's what they choose to be the outlet for relief. Or they're playing video games. And I'm a major video game player, right? But they're like, I get lost in video games for 2 hours at a night, and I'm a dad who has a bunch of kids. And okay, well, you didn't actually get filled by that. What you did is you medicated and you checked out. So what I'm saying in this is a lot of people don't have space for their creativity because they haven't tackled their emotional state, and they're finding things to medicate their pain. So if they begin here with the emotional state, they'll naturally move everything out of their way that they're medicating with and have the capacity to create and be fulfilled by it.
And it's really easy too, because I know for myself, I can relate to video games, but even with movies, anything that's like recreational or entertaining, it's easy to, because it's not drinking, it's not hard drugs, it's not like stuff that is considered
destructive
super destructive or physically damaging. And so I know for myself, I would, like, after put kids down for bed and like work, I was working with clients that stressed me out, and I would just take them just because of that desperation and, you know, like that just broke mentality of like, I got it, even though I wasn't broke at all. And it's just like I would escape in video games. So I'd spend hours at night just playing, and they're great, but it's like there's a point of like, okay, we're playing for fun for like an hour with my friends versus like we're doing this all the time. And that's all I like, because that was my release and my escape. And it wasn't until I sat down and I was like, wow, why am I choosing that over like doing date night with my wife or things like that? And I had to like dig deep, and I was like, wow, like that is my personal relief and escape from all the stuff that I'm not facing. And I don't want the questions I don't want to answer. And so once I was able to put that out and then schedule more time to create the things that I wanted.
Yep.
And then it just became this freedom, and it was this release. And now video games have a different vibe to me. Like it's something I could do to connect with friends online now and then. But for me, it doesn't have the hold that it once did.
One of the things that's really detrimental for a lot of people, like talking about this, so they sit down to become creative, right? They want to like maybe work on a project or something, get inspired, but that silence that's necessary to actually get connected to what I want to create opens up the space for all the yammering internal voices that you've been avoiding. Mm-hmm. Right. So all of a sudden I get still enough and quiet enough, which is a space that sometimes we really have to get to if we're going to start to tap our creativity. If we want to tap into what do I really want to do? What do I really want to express? Who am I really, and how do I want to get that out there through my art or whatever that creative expression is? All of a sudden the demons come running. Your personal demons that you're battling with, those internal demons of fear, insecurity, pain, loss, suffering, whatever you want to call that, so to say, right? And all of a sudden they hit surface, and then that's when you run. Everyone jumps up and runs. And until you're willing to settle into that space and get uncomfortable and get the medication out of your life, you won't have access to your creativity.
And I like that, getting out of your comfort zone. So for you, what did you do to block out your time when you were deciding to create this book for yourself? And then what were your uncomfortable moments and breakthroughs in that?
Okay, well, it's interesting because the Tree of Life came in phases. So the book is an allegory of, it's about an allegory of overcoming your greatest pain, facing your greatest fears, processing grief and tragedy when great loss strikes your life. But it was lessons that I was learning in life. And so there were seasons where I literally felt like, because I wrote it over the course of about 3 or 4 years.
Mm-hmm. So you didn't just sit down and write it over a weekend. This wasn't like I blocked out the time, and then I'm so good. This is done.
Mic drop. No, I didn't. There was pieces of my life that I had to experience to interject into the story that was inside of it, because I wasn't trying to write something I didn't know about. The greatest art comes out of writing what you know about. And there was something I was learning about myself that was getting injected into the characters and into the story at the time. But what happened was I had to... there were days where I felt inspired. Like experiences would happen and I'm like, oh my gosh, you have these aha moments, those fresh inspirations where it feels like you have all access to creativity and wisdom and there's almost no force that can stop you. And I was like, oh my God, here it comes. I'm banging out all this information. It felt easy. Then I remember I spent a lot of days sitting pissed off at Starbucks. And I would maybe get a paragraph out and I was angry and I felt like I wanted to quit. And, you know, the inspired moments, there was grace on it. And these moments where I had to sit down and actually pound the pavement, I wouldn't say that there wasn't grace on it, but the grace was different. The grace was for me to learn how to cultivate my creative muscles, my creativity. It was about me working something inside of me and sitting down and trying to pull from the deepest places inside of me to pull something out that was always there. And so there were times that it wasn't fun. And then there were times where I actually had to tap out. And that tapping out was like, I'm not inspired. There's nothing I can pull from the deepest places inside of me. So I started to learn, where is it that I actually need to dig deep? And then I started learning the ebbs and flows of, I don't have it here, and I'm torturing myself, and I'm hating the creative process, and so I need to walk away. Also in that season, I had a unique thing happening that most people wouldn't have happening. And in that season, my wife was working and I wasn't working. And there was an invitation to learn how to settle in to the idea that I wasn't adding financial value to our home. And I was having to face one of the greatest masculine fears, which is not being the provider. There's a lie inside of us as men that says that if I'm not providing, I don't have value. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not creating, I don't have any value. Creating, like, I'm not being productive. Mm-hmm. You know, what people view as productive. Like, I got my 8 to 5 job and I made something happen today. So there was a timeout that I was put in for on and off over the course of 2 years. I'd work ebbs and flows in the summer and go work for my dad in the summer. But then I'd be back to doing nothing. And having to create out of the nothingness was one of the greatest challenges, felt the most suffering and the most liberating all at the same time, because I had to answer a question inside of me as I did it. Does my life have value, especially if I'm creating right now and it's not making me any money and it's not going to make me any money in the future potentially? Am I more than enough as a person? Am I worthy? Does my life have value to it right now? And that is something that is a terrifying question to have to answer, but it's the most liberating.
And what do you consider value for your life? Because some people would say if you aren't working, then you're not valuable. Or if you're not doing X, or if you don't have X, Y, Z, then your life doesn't have value. And it's finding that value of yourself, of just being a person and being alive and knowing that you are valuable.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I'm gonna have to be really honest in how I answer this in a way that I don't know. Some of your listeners may not understand, may not agree with. I don't care. But
love you.
I had to tap into my Creator, into God, and I had to realize that I am a child of God, and so if my source is other human beings, depending on, because we all have our own God. And what I mean by that is my wife could be my God if I don't actually have somebody that's outside of her. Craig could be my God. My employer could be my God. The people who view my creative artwork could be my God. If I'm giving my identity and my value over to them and saying, what do you say about me? And so in that season, what was happening is I was having an interaction with God, and I was saying, Jesus, what do you say about me? And I was having this encounter with an unconditionally loving creator who said, Justin, I love you. You are more than enough. You were made in my image. Irregardless of what you produce or what people think about you, you were made in my image, and I love you just as you are. And there was something relationally being cultivated inside of that space where there was a new truth being downloaded to my brain, to my emotions, to all of that. And inside of it, I settled into, irregardless of what I do and what people think, I'm a child of God. And I have value simply because of that. And because God loves me, I'm going to choose to love myself. And so I began to reflect that higher truth to myself and say, Justin, I love you, even if you don't do anything major today. And I think that like if my job became being a janitor and cleaning toilets, and this isn't a dig on those people, I actually have a high value for them. But a lot of people, they assess what value is based on your job and what kind of job you're performing,
Your title. It's the title, right?
Yeah, the title. And so I was like, well, if society says cleaning toilets is an unworthy job, which I actually don't think it is. I'm actually deeply grateful for janitors and the people who are making lives wonderful. But it was like these lowly jobs people look down on. If I was doing those, there would be value and honor in doing that and being the person that does that simply because I'm a child of God. And so what was stripping is like pride and arrogance is stripped in the process of tapping into unconditional love and loving yourself. And so that's where I was able to settle into my creative space. And this is important for you creatives as you're listening, because when you can actually tap into your higher identity, going back to early on in this conversation in my college self, if you can tap into this higher source of value and going, who do you say I am, God? And you feel comfortable inside of that, you're not tossed to and fro when some parent says, what are you doing with your life? You're wasting it away doing that creative expression. Go get a real job. You're not spun out. You're like, I'm okay that we disagree. I'm totally good with where I'm at. Mom and dad aren't my God. It's okay that they're displeased or they disagree with where I'm at. I'm at peace with myself. You will thrive in that type of space.
That's really powerful. I know we're almost out of time, but I would really love to just touch on for people who are either on like the outside of like a relationship with God looking in, or people who might have been raised in church, but really there's so many people who either have been raised in church or just touched on church who have only been exposed to religion. And this is going to offend a lot of religious spirited people in this, but what does it look like for you when you say you tap into God and you are a son of God? Because religion says everything's in this box. You come, you do this thing, it's all in order, and it's all about rules and regulations. Whereas an actual relationship is the complete opposite of religion. And how does that fit into you and your breakthroughs in tapping into God for your creativity?
Well, that's a big, broad question. There's a lot to that. Let me start with this. When you talk about rules and regulations, in relationship with an unconditionally loving creator, see, it's my belief that our creator gave us free will. And our creator doesn't want to give us black and white rules. There aren't a bunch of black and white rules. When Jesus was asked, what's the highest commandment? Love your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, And the invitation is to get out of black and white rules. Black and white rules, let me back up a little bit. People love rules, and they love the idea of a God of rules because I can control a God of rules, right? I can control a God that I'm not in relationship with. So this is how we control that God. Give me the rules and I can make you love me, because I will perform and do every little duty that you have written down, and then I can make that love. You have to accept me. You have to forgive me. You have to enjoy me, because I did exactly what you wanted and I followed you to the perfect T. And so ultimately, religious people are control freaks. People who are choosing to act religious are control freaks who don't believe that they're already loved. So this idea of getting into this space of I'm a child of God, and I wouldn't relate to my wife this way. I wouldn't give her a blanket set of rules and be like, follow these rules if you want to be close to me. If I actually want to have a relationship with my wife, I give her the free will to make the decisions that she wants. And sometimes she may make destructive decisions. That doesn't mean that I hate her. That doesn't mean that I won't choose her. It just means she's messy and she's human. And we're in relationship going to work through that. And in the process of working through that, like, if it's not about, let me say this. To me, it's not about right or wrong, good or bad. It's actually about life or death, creation or destruction. There are decisions in my life that will perpetuate destruction, chaos, pain, and suffering. And as long as I don't love myself and I think that I'm unworthy, I will make those decisions, and it will destroy my ability to create and have a fulfilled life. But when I line up with the idea that I am chosen and I am loved and I am in relationship with a creator that just wants to know me and chooses me and puts value on me, I will begin to see myself as worthy, and I want to make worthy, valuable decisions. So it's like when you paid a high price for a Lamborghini, you don't drive it like you stole it. You want to actually drive it nice and take care of it, especially if it cost you a high price that wasn't easy to pay. And so in that value, you go, I want to make decisions that aren't destructive and don't bring more chaos. And I tell people it's like this. I don't have an affair on my wife for multiple reasons. Number one, I love myself and I love her. And having an affair on her would destroy her heart. It destroys my heart. It'll destroy my business. It'll destroy my credibility. It'll destroy people who are connected to me. And why is this? Like, when I live out of a value system and the effects of a relationship, believing that there's someone who wants to relate to me rather than just give me rules, because at the end of the day, you'll get exhausted by rules and you'll give up because it'll feel like too much. But when I operate out of a relationship where there's grace, there's understanding, there's healing, that's where freedom happens, and that's where creativity flows from. So I don't know that I even answered your question, but that's what it sparked inside of me to say.
No, that was great. That was powerful. And I feel like we should do a part 2 of this sometime soon.
I would love to do a part 2 with you, man.
Well, Justin, I just want to thank you so much for your time. I know we're running out of time. This is going to be a pretty long video, but I'm looking forward to doing part 2. For everyone listening, just kind of what are your final closing thoughts, and then where can people connect with you and find out more information about you if they want to continue to do life?
Yeah, here's my final closing thoughts. Back in my first year of marriage, we took about a year off work. Actually, in one exact year off of work. And 6 months of it was spent in Burbank, California. And I had no idea what I was going to do with the next step of my life. And I was really scared at that time. And I had yet to have the idea for the tree of life. I had yet to, make our next move. And I heard like this, I don't know how else to put it, like an internal audible voice. It was like this phrase, because I would be like, I don't know what to do. Just tell me what to do next. And that was a question that I kept having because I'm trying to figure out what my life is going to be. And I heard this phrase, learn how to come alive. And at first that really pissed me off. I'm like, what the hell does that even mean? Learn how to come alive. But the statement was actually an invitation. It was an invitation to begin to dig into my own world and to dig in to life in relationships. And I began to find the beauty of life all around me, whether it was in the buildings that people built, the person who was standing right in front of me and their story. I began to find the beauty in nature. I began to see the goodness that was all around me that had been hidden under the negativity and the pessimism and the fear. And that initiated my creative process. So why am I saying this? I think to wrap this up, my challenge to your listeners is this. There's an invitation today to learn how to come alive. There's an invitation to begin to go, what are the things that I'm not facing inside of me that are keeping me from authentically expressing who I am and tapping the fullness of my creativity? I would say that this should be a question that you not only hold close to your heart for the current season that you're in, but you hold it close to your heart the rest of your life. You know, what does it look like to learn how to come alive? Learn how to come alive. And that's something that from season to season, where am I not living? What does it look like for me to be fully alive? What could that feel like? And what could the byproduct of that be? So I know that kind of veers away from everything, but I think that begins the process of initiating a lot of the things that will lead to the greatest creative expressions that could come out of some of your viewers. So how can people find me and stuff? You can find me. Right now we're working on multiple websites. My wife and I have websites all over the place, and we're trying to redo everything. But you can find me at justinstumvoll.com. You can get me there. You can go to justinandabi.com. That's justinandabi.com to find out some of what we're doing. I have the Tree of Life there on justinandabi.com, and I have other stuff that I work on. And I do a podcast called The Connected Life, which I think if you're interested in the journey of getting healing and transformation, I currently am doing The Connected Life, and we talk about how to get connected to yourself, connected to others, and connected to the world and right in front of you. And I have a former podcast that's out there called The Liberation Project, a movement for manhood. And we took people on a wild journey of healing and transformation. It was for men, but a lot of women listened to it. So those are some of the key places that you could probably find out more about me.
Great. And I'll put those down in the description. Thank you so much, Justin, for joining us today.
Craig, thanks for letting me share and inviting me into this. And I honestly had a really tough time not cracking jokes at you, because that's how we function. We're always bantering, and I was like, stay on track.
Stay on target.
Yeah. Give some straightforward answers, because I could have been rambling on jokes the entire time.
We can do that in part 2.
All right, we'll do that, man. Hey, I love you, buddy. Thanks for the honor of letting me on here.
Bye.
Bye.